Shop Talk Live, episode number 214.5, bonus. And with the bonus in mind, we decided to try something a little different today, a little silly today, possibly. There's a certain contingency of podcast listeners who really enjoy it when I am joined by Barry and Anissa, and we get a little giggly. So this episode, we decided let's not even start with any questions. Let's just start a video chat and hit record. It's a little different. And if you're not into random meandering conversations that may or may not pertain to woodworking, this is not your episode. Hit stop now. But if you are, enjoy. I should note that before the isolation period began, Barry and Anissa were both bragging that they owned Philip Morley hats. That's all of the backstory you need. All right, on with the show.
Wait a second. Do you have a knit Philip Morley cap?
In some form or fashion.
He one-upped us, Anissa. Do you slap a sticker on your knit hat?
I printed up the logo on a piece of paper and it's blue taped to my knit hat.
Phil, he's impinging on your IP.
I'm selling this. If my wife didn't knit this cap, I'd sell it. It looks good, doesn't it?
It does.
That looks pretty natural. And I like the grayscale on the gray knit cap.
Yeah. Nailed it. How you like that? How you like them apples?
Darn.
I knew you guys were going to do the hat thing. So. I would have forgotten if you didn't send us the picture of Helen in the hat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she was mocking me.
I guess she's leaning into the mic too, like a super serious news person.
Oh, you should have heard the things she was saying about woodworking. Like, stop.
This just in, my mom's a jerk. I don't have 2 scoops of ice cream every night. What is that? Call in with your opinions. Like, that's what she looks like.
So I just watched, we just watched Seabiscuit. And have you guys seen that movie?
Is that a horse movie?
Seabiscuit? Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was a glue movie.
What?
I thought it was a movie about glue, like a glue documentary.
No, that's the...
Seabiscuit's the prequel, that's right.
But William H. Macy is the announcer. He's fantastic in that movie. He's just like, he's the announcer and he's just doing that like old-timey 1930s, 40s announcer.
So, I'll move my camera for the people at home. Ben had us order these mics so we could do this podcast. And they're spears with this, I don't know, what is that? With what is it, a pop screen in front of it?
Pop filter.
But it looks straight out of the 30s. So after I opened this box, the whole time I was setting it up, I was talking like this, see, while I was getting all the wires together and just setting up the arm beam. It just is natural. Can't do this on the podcast. Get it out now.
There was such a run on podcasting mics.
Get out.
Yeah.
I believe it.
There was like a week where like we had Mike order one and some of the home building guys order one, and then they were gone. Like it was until 2 or 3 weeks later until I told you guys, all right, buy these right now, because everybody's starting a podcast.
I want to see the chart of when things sold out during the pandemic, like toilet paper. Where did podcast mics happen?
Right, yeah.
What else did they run out of before they got the podcast mics? Damn. You guys doing any woodworking?
Are you trying to start the podcast?
I thought we started. I figured at some point we need to
I think at some point we're in already. Yeah. Barry, you're so good though, because you always try and hey, cold open.
How about this segue again?
Enough of us. I'm working on a uke too.
Oh, sweet.
I've got a weird thing going on though, where I keep screwing this one thing up, but I'm relishing it. Because So the liners, these little inside parts, normally you just buy like this little kerfed lining. So it's a piece of wood with a bunch of saw kerfs in it, so it bends really, really easily. I like doing solid linings, so just because I want to make everything in the ukulele, and making the kerfed lining is a huge pain in the butt. So I do solid linings, and normally you hot pipe bend them to the form and get it all perfect, and it just seems really inefficient to me. So on number 2, I steamed them, and then I hot pipe bent them to the form. And steaming them prior to hot pipe bending them just they just turn into like limp noodles, and just they do whatever you want them to do. It's incredible. It's like,
So in a good way.
yeah, it's like working with leather at that point. And then and there's a ukulele maker, Bo Hannum, who he does hot pipe bend and then a lamination of 2 of them. So you only have to bend, like a 1/16 of an inch piece, and then you laminate them together. You get the thickness, and there's the stiffness of a bent lamination, and the ease of hot bending. So I've been steaming. So this round I tried to steam them just to my form in 2 pieces. And then once they dry, then you glue them up together as a bent lamination to the form. But I have been experimenting with like ways of, because eventually I could see making a bunch of ukuleles. So I'm trying to get my processes down.
Yeah.
And that's really fun. I find getting processes like really as efficient as humanly possible. That's an enjoyable part of woodworking for me.
Are you taking notes? Like, is that
that's one thing I need to start doing, is taking better notes on my ukes as I build them. But so right now what I'm doing is I'm steaming these little things, and I've got bending forms, or like drying forms. So I put them on the drying form. I put them in the kiln overnight. They come out rigid as all get out, and then I glue them together and to the form, to the ukulele body.
Okay.
And so I'm just, this is all really, really confusing and disjointed, but I am relishing this time where it's just, oh, screwed that up, but I learned something. Do it again. Screwed that up, but I learned something. And like last night I came up with like the weirdest drying form. It's like where I can do half of a uke's worth on one drying form. Okay. Because if the drying form is too thin, so that I can get spring clamps around it, it winds up I'm making it out of particle board. It winds up warping on its own.
Like deforming
under not even under the clamping pressure, just from the heat or just from whatever.
Yeah.
And so now I'm, using old plywood cutoffs to make these double-sided drying forms so that they have the structural integrity of a wider drying form. But it's all I'm very much in the weeds, but enjoying it.
Sweet.
What about, so you've been woodworking?
Yeah. So my brother has this, thankfully, like a little DIY-ish type shop. He's got this job site table saw that I have a love-hate relationship with, and a chop saw and a router with 2 bases. Am I missing something? A random orbit sander. Oh, and a planer. And so nothing terribly fancy, but you can get plenty done. And he and his wife wanted a farmhouse table. And cool, easy. So he and I have been going over, we did slip tenons, and I wanted to do like just normal mortise and tenon, or integral tenons. But I don't trust that table saw. Like, it's not like I'm working with 4x4s and sometimes parts sandwiched, like 1x stock sandwiched on either side to widen it up for some reveals. And I just didn't like doing the tenons on that size of a saw without enough side feed support. and you can't get a dado stack in there anyway.
Okay, so you're more just worried about the table saw tipping over.
I'm worried about the piece tipping over.
Oh.
Like, I'm going to get tired holding down a 4x to get good tenons. So I didn't. So we ended up doing slip tenons for the whole thing, including the breadboard ends.
Does he have any hand tools?
No. I mean, he has a Ryoba that he got from the home center. He has chisels, but they're not sharp. They're like in the box. It was an extra set I had and gave him. So those and my oil stone and sharpening jig are just hanging out in a drawer. And I'm not going to flatten those backs for him. I don't love them that much.
And you're under quarantine. You have some better things to do right now.
Dude, that's dawned on me. I'm like, no, draw the line. You can't be flattening backs for your younger brother. But it's been cool. It's almost done. I'm mostly happy with the job we did, considering the tools we had.
Yeah.
But now he's talking about selling it because his coworker. My brother's a hustler, so his coworker, some dude he works with, wants to build one, and my brother showed him the one we're making. He's like, "Oh, I wonder if he'll just buy that one. Then we can make a different one that looks like this." Dude, focus, focus, please, for the love of God. But if you can get a good price, why not?
But wait a minute. I'm making him a ukulele for free.
It's true.
He's already got this business going
yeah. Yeah, we're just going to be fencing the goods for him. What?
He's going to sell the ukulele.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah. So, but it's been cool having a shop, and he had this one really pretty 4x4. I'm like, that's not going on a table that we're going to stain. So I just squirreled it off in the corner as a spare, and had this really tight, clear vertical grain Doug fir on one face. Or the whole thing was Doug fir. It was very clear and vertical on one face.
It was really weird. It was cedar, but Doug fir on one face.
But I was able to resaw that and make this little box that was like a personal project, It was fun.
Oh, yeah. Is that the one with the painted plywood bottom or something you put?
Yeah.
That was nice.
I'm liking the painted bottoms. I did that for some boxes I made for my undies at home, my unmentionables. And it's just, I'm enjoying the painted plywood bottom. It's like the ease of gluing on plywood without the hideousness,
This is the second podcast that you've brought up your underwear.
You haven't been counting that well, have you?
I guess not.
I mean, we haven't hung out in 6 weeks, so we have some catching up to do in regards to.
That's true. I got to keep the pace going.
Yeah.
Undie talk. Wait, so what's it like working with Trex?
Very different than working with wood. What?
Mary's in podcast mode, and Anissa, what's it like working with Trex?
All right, guys, the power just cut off. My brother must have hit the circuit, and we're doing a podcast. I mean,
it's very different than working with wood. I wasn't expecting how different. Just even when I got the bulk of it, I got mostly 16-footers, and normally I would just tie that down on top of a vehicle, but it's so floppy and slippery. And I didn't trust the straps, and somebody gave me a tip where you wrap the ends up with cardboard and strap that all together. So I made a cardboard sleeve for both ends, and I did tie them all to the top of the van.
And that stopped them from being all floppy?
No, the van, slippy? I actually went in my Subaru and just decided that was a bad decision. So I paid for everything. I drove home, swapped vehicles, and I got the van, which is really, which is long and flat on top. So I was able to, they were supported that way.
Yeah.
But then just the forward, backward movement had me a little nervous because it's so slick.
Yeah.
But other than those two things, how floppy and slippery, it's kind of the same.
All right. So I have a lumberyard during quarantine question, because I've seen The one that I would use if I was back in Connecticut, and I've seen other people post about this, you can go pick up boards.
Yeah.
Which I guess is the same as if you were doing like commercial residential work. You just get 100 board feet or 1,000 board feet or whatever. Would you do that? No, if I need one piece of 8-quarter white oak.
I went to Rings End,
Mm-hmm.
like the outside of Connecticut. It's like the higher end hardware lumber yard. And because I was like, all right, if I'm going to spend money, I'm going to spend it locally. And I went to Rings End to get 3 12-foot 1x10s to build some shelving for Katie's weaving room. And so they had curbside service set up. It was obviously meant for contractors trying to make their way through this environment right now. And so I walked up. He goes, "What do you need?" I was like, some 1x10s, 3 12-footers, and I needed other things too. I needed stuff in the store, but I was not going to bother him with it.
Yeah.
And so he goes, "Do you have an account?" I was like, "No." He goes, "All right, give me your card." It was obvious that the service was not for dudes like me right now.
Right.
And I felt like, yeah, okay. And this was a week ago. It felt too soon to be buying lumber because it didn't need.
Yeah.
But then again, it's like it was supporting a local business that's trying to get through, and they were being really safe. And, everybody was masked up. Everybody was distant. So I felt like, okay, would I go back and do it again? I don't know, but I don't feel too guilty about buying it. And here come the comments.
Well, also,
YouTube, just light me up.
Would you? So if you were looking for cherry, like something that you were going to put into a uke or furniture, do you have that kind of relationship with a lumberyard, or would you expect to be able to say, "Hey, I'm looking for center cathedrals with the rift on either, like so many inches of rift"?
Like we always talk about that place in Nashville that they had like the bins of cherry and the bins of walnut. Like a place like that, I would go to right now. I don't know if I would go to the place where they have to pull it down with a forklift.
Yeah, I don't like going there without a pandemic.
You get nervous. I get nervous.
I get annoyed. It's like I like being left alone, like let me just do my thing. But I'll go where they have lumber. I'm not gonna. Oh well.
What else have you been working on, Anissa?
Just the treehouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not really getting much time to do it, but here's my big plan I'm just laying the platform right now. I'm going to do like a curved Richard Serra-esque house on it. So
is that the kid from Arrested Development?
Yeah. So he's the guy that does those big steel. I'll send you a link, Ben. Those big steel sculptures that you can walk in, and they're concave. Anyway, well, they tip in this way, and they're kind of swirly. They're really hard to describe, but they're magical.
So hang on. I just Googled Richard Serra, and a photo of Michael Serra came up.
Oh, Serra.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Oh, right. You're Googling too.
Oh, dude.
Right? They're really cool.
Yeah.
So
wait, does he have a piece in that horrible museum?
What,
in the horrible museum? Yeah.
Oh, that place is fantastic.
The truth comes out.
I couldn't take it. I'm sorry. I couldn't take it. His piece was cool.
It's super cool. Look. Can you see those?
You're holding up your tiny cell phone to the pixelated camera. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No,
you'll have to send that to me. Yeah.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, show notes. ShopTalkLive.com.
So that's my plan. I got a whole stack of lumber from the lumberyard down the street. every time I drive by, there's a different pile that they're just liquidating out there.
Oh, that's cool.
So I got it. Yeah. So for $75, I got 6 or 7 2x12 by 12s and probably 22 2x10 by 10s.
Dude.
Yeah. I got a ton of lumber for $75. I know,
Wait,
right?
all of that together, that wasn't just a stack of the by 12.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. No, like 2x10 by
that's a stack
12.
you buy just cause.
It's a ton. There's a ton of lumber for $75. And
that's good. I'm glad you got more lumber. I know you were running low.
We were worried about you.
So it's all pine, and I'm going to cooper the whole thing. The whole house is going to be coopered, and it's not going to have a door on it. And then I'm going to have a clear roof. Why are you guys laughing at me?
And there's going to be a magical pixie fountain.
That's what I imagine Nisa picturing, but everyone in the neighborhood, this is going to become the crazy house that no one gets candy from at Halloween. Like, no, we don't go near that house. I know my friend Timmy's brother went in there once. He never came out.
Like it's the street before I walk the dog.
My poor neighbors. I've been working on like the post for this treehouse, and then like the infrastructure underneath for a couple years now. Like this is 2 years in the making, and I'm finally getting the platform on, and I got this lumber. I'm on a roll. Because I want my kids in this treehouse before they graduate college while they can still fit in the thing. And so it wasn't until the other day when I was up putting the planks down on my home building terminology stinks, on the joists or whatever. I basically built a bird's eye view into my next door neighbor's yard. So we were basically... I apologized to them. I said, look, this is just temporary. Once I get the house up, we will not be able to see you. You won't be able to see us. I won't put any windows on that side. But I'm just like perched on the fence line looking into their yard. It's terrible for them.
It's only terrible if you go out there every time they're out there.
Yeah. I mean, but we're all in our yards a lot. You know, they're pretty outdoor oriented, and we are too. And, you know, I lock my kids out of the house and leave them in the yard for long periods of time. So I'm just kidding. I don't do that. I don't lock them outside.
They're on a leash with a stake in the ground. Just running circles.
So, yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with the treehouse now. So that's awesome. That's my plan.
So I went to a lumber yard down here with that same kind of liquidation bin. And at first I was really excited, except the dude used it to try to upsell me and my brother. So we go in there looking for southern yellow pine. And it was a lumber yard. My brother had never been to a lumber yard before. He'd only bought wood from like home centers. Like, cool, we'll go to a lumber yard. Let's do this together, you know? And it's clear as soon as we walk in, this is a fancy lumber yard, and like fancy decking and slabs in the back and kind of some boards and bins, but not, it's like shoved into a corner. We're walking out, and somebody who works there says, hey, can I help you guys? I said, yeah, we're looking for like 2x stocks, maybe 4x4 southern yellow pine, just like cheap stuff for a farmhouse table. He goes, mulls it over, sips his Starbucks. He goes, you know, I don't know if we have any of that in stock, but here, let me show you this Brazilian cherry. And he has these like little like 1x1 by, I don't know, 6 foot strips of little 1x of, apparently it's Jatoba Brazilian cherry. And that's how they had it labeled.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Maybe not.
For the next 10 minutes tries to sell us. It was like, well, if you laminate them together, you can really get some good looking pieces. I'm like, dude, I came in here looking for southern yellow pine, and you're trying to sell me this like $7 board foot check. Thank you, but no thank you.
They saw you guys coming. The guy goes, watch this. I'm going to waste half an hour of their day. I got nothing better to do.
And this was at the beginning. So I think Florida was about a week and a half behind the Northeast in terms of the coronavirus hitting. So people were kind of wary things were slowing down, but it wasn't shut down yet. You were just kind of like looking at each other with side eye, keeping distance. So he probably had a half hour to kill. You're absolutely right.
I got a hot Starbucks and time. That's all he
Exactly.
had.
And these two
And nothing
clowns.
you can afford.
Yeah, look at these two chuckleheads.
Barry, you said you had a love-hate relationship with that table saw. I've only heard the hate part. What's the love part?
It's a table
It's
saw.
a table saw.
Yeah.
Like I was able to resaw a 4x4 and I can do half laps and tenons, but it's not. So, I mean, it's a table saw. I'm trying. Whenever I use it, I think.
Or is it a contractor? Like
It's
does it have
job
a
site.
base?
It's bench top. No, it's like pick it up, carry it to work.
Okay.
And it's one that I see a lot, I think, around YouTube. It's popular and it works well for what it is. And every time when I'm using,
same thing about you, Barry.
just keep the expectations low. His in-feed sucks, but
Love-hate relationship.
It's just, I think I've gotten spoiled with using contractor saws, and not just the power, but the size. Like there's not enough in-feed that I feel safe on this job site.
That's one problem with contractor and job site saw. Like the in-feed before the blade.
Mm-hmm.
You've got no room to use a miter gauge or
right.
Yeah.
And like registering the stock to the fence before I put it through. It's like, this is not, it's better than table saw, but I'm not sure if it's better than a bandsaw and some hand planes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Huh.
And a router table. But
is it blue or yellow?
It's yellow.
Okay.
And I know this is not trying to set up, like tune everything so it's aligned and parallel and square and blah, 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 was a fool's errand, man. Maybe it's just beyond me, but it did not stay put, the settings, which is a drag. But farmhouse table, so like, whatever.
Did you ever use what was the first table saw you used?
My dad's Jet hybrid contract.
Okay.
Not contractor.
So
I guess contractor. Yeah.
A nicer table saw.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, could rip through stock with no issue. Was a good size. I didn't use it much, but it wasn't. I feel like if I hand someone a job site saw, I have to explain limitations of, you might need to raise the blade twice before you rip through the whole piece,
Mm-hmm.
But I went from my dad's to the 3-horse saw stop, both at school and at our old shop.
Yeah, like the first joiner I used was the 16-inch SAMI at the old shop.
It was the second joiner I used.
Like I look at my 8-inch Powermatic, I'm like, oh, it's so small. But you could, and I have to keep that in mind sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I did have like a really bad benchtop table saw.
Mm-hmm.
So I did experience that. But there are some people out there who use like little yellow benchtop table saws that get unbelievable performance out of them. Like Tamar, yeah. 3x3 customs. I mean, it blows me away what she can do with that little saw.
So whenever I start to poo-poo this table saw, I think of Tamar and like the intricate like 3-way miter she's pulling off. I go, no, it's me.
Yeah.
It is me.
Yeah. But like, it's because that's what she has, and she's always made it work for her.
The fence is pretty cool because it registers on both guide rails, and you adjust it via rack and pinion. And the argument is that helps it stay parallel once you make it parallel.
Mm-hmm.
And I trust that fence to be rigid. It's not floppy at all. So I'd probably take a big bandsaw over this table saw, but it's still a table saw. It still works and is nice, and it's nicer than nothing, for sure. So I had a question about another yellow table saw. Anissa, something was special about the one that you sold Tetro?
Oh, it had the slider.
In my head, that is wicked cool, and and you did upgrade to a saw stop. But in my head, that's the only thing I would want to upgrade to. Otherwise I would be happy with that saw. Am I overhyping it?
I rarely used it.
Oh.
Wait,
Well,
the
it's a
slider
small
attachment or the
slider.
saw?
The slider.
Uh-huh.
I will say those were some of the years that I was not woodworking at much at all.
Okay.
Just because I had little people to take care of, but like really little ones. But I didn't use the slider as much as I thought I would.
Okay.
I guess I'm just so used to not having it, and I just didn't switch over the way I worked. Does that make sense?
You a miter gauge person or crosscut sled person?
Ooh.
Like, what's the first one you're picking up?
Probably the miter gauge, just because it's smaller and easier. But I mean, I will get the sled out. I'm a little bit of a lazy woodworker.
Am I the only one who feels like Mike judges you every time you talk about a miter gauge? Because he's a sled man. That dude is a table saw sled guy. And every time I'm like, oh yeah, kind of, that's right. You gave me sleds with that table saw. I kind of don't use them.
I kind of used the fence for you.
I took them apart and made a ukulele neck out of one. He's always like, ugh.
Do you have to mute out his sound of disgust when you're remixing the podcast? Oh man.
Well, they're so good and they're so versatile, and there's so much you can do as far as stops and stuff on a sled that you could
do it on a miter gauge too, though. That's what I think that miter gauges have gotten a bad rap lately.
I don't think Bexford.
I don't know where this lately thing is from.
I don't think Bexford has a sled. I think he always uses his miter gauge.
Get out.
He has it tricked out, but yeah, he has a really nice fence on it. It's really beefy. We should.
I kind of want to make so I have a tricked out miter gauge with, it's not well, whatever. Shut up, Ben. It's kind of tricked out, and
it's better than Bexford's, is what you're saying. You're saying, come at me, Chris.
No. I've got youth on that man, and that's it. But the piece has to be to the left of the blade. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I want to make a separate tricked out miter gauge that cuts to the right of the blade.
Yeah.
And if I had that, I feel like I would never use my sled.
I think that's one thing I like about sleds is I can switch to the other side and not I don't have to think ahead with sleds. And that's why I dealt with picking up the 40-pound one we had at the old shop.
Yeah.
It kind of strained my shoulder joints, but it was it was just so unnecessarily enormous. But it just felt like one less thing I had to think about beforehand.
Yeah. I have one discussion that I wanted to ask you guys, because I feel like this trio is the best trio to answer this. What?
There goes Bongo.
Bongo.
Yeah. I saw something move over there. What do you think that people like Chris Bexford and Tim Rousseau and Bob Van Dyke and Chris Schwartz and all of these awesome people that we work with, do you think they're superhuman?
They're superhuman?
Well, like I think a lot of people think they are otherworldly woodworkers and super, super talented and skilled, and they are, but they still make the mistakes that most other people make, and they're just able to recover from them. And you see them. Our job is weird because we get to see these people make dumb mistakes and say, oh yeah, okay, that happens to everyone. They're just better at recovering or something.
I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast before, but I was working with Will Neptune in Bob Van Dyke's shop.
Yeah.
Will used to be the head of the cabinet and furniture making program at North Bennett. He's a cartouche winner. He's
well qualified.
Yeah, like the dude's fantastic. We're doing, what was it? Dovetail dividers. And so it's these dividers that are dadoed into cases, and at the front they have a little short dovetail. And Will was doing 4 different variations. After you route the dado and make the dovetail, you cut the slot with a saw, or he does it with a saw and chisel and the router plane. And he nailed one. Like, after sawing and like, he got it on the first try, which I was fully expecting. You know, like, this is what Will Neptune does. He calls over Bob. Bob, check this out. Yo, I nailed this dovetail. Check this out. What is going on? And I couldn't even contain myself. I squint. I'm like, you're Will Neptune. You're calling over Bob. Like, what is this strange alternate universe? And Will said, he says, what's the point of doing it if you're not going to get excited by it? I'm like, yeah,
that's a good point.
Absolutely fair. And so that, I don't know if that made him more or less superhuman. The fact that he remains excited about nailing a single dovetail for an article, you know, like the rest of the carcass was screwed together, but he was pretty stoked.
What do you think, Anissa?
Do I think I don't know. We've talked about this question, I think, in a couple different meetings, and I think we may have framed it as, I remember like one big, not just fine woodworking staff, but one of those meetings where everybody was in. We talked about, is the master craftsman the person who doesn't make any mistakes, or is he or she the person who just recovers from their mistakes quickly? Maybe both. Maybe it's both. Maybe they are super duper woodworkers, and they are just able to take all that experience, and they make fewer mistakes maybe, but they still make them. And when they do make them, they're just like, I know how to fix that, and they move on. So maybe it's a combination of both of those things. They have way more history and mileage and experience, so they make fewer mistakes, but they can also really recover from them and not get fazed by them.
When was the last time either of you made a mistake and freaked out? Or like, I can't fix it. Or like wanted to throw the piece against the wall. Like,
this is, I think, what question I should have posed. Because that is a much better representation of what I have gleaned from the people that we work with. Is that they make the mistake, but they just do it with style. You know? it's
falling with style.
Like, I don't think the last time I made a mistake that it was just like, this is done, this is stupid. It was before this job, I think, because you see so much experience and so much work that goes into these beautiful pieces by our authors that, oh crap, this isn't an unattainable thing. And maybe it's just the fact that if you watch a phenomenal guitar player, you're just watching the performance. You're not watching all of the years and hours practicing, right? We get to watch the practice too. We don't just see the end results.
Mm-hmm.
We see some of the repetitions. And ever since then, it's like before I was talking about how I'm screwing up this one thing, but I feel like every time I screw it up, I learn more and I get closer to the final goal of being able to produce these efficiently. And it's because I sit there and think like, oh yeah, Tim Rousseau has probably wandered down this path before too, you know?
Go on, Anissa.
No, go ahead, Barry.
On this table that I'm doing, my brother.
I'm beating you at Words with Friends. You go first.
I'm winning by like 30 points. This is a what have you done for me lately environment, Anissa.
This game, you might be ahead a little bit.
my brother wanted breadboard ends. Like, oh, come on, fine. So we'll do breadboard ends. And I was draw boring them, and it's 5 pegs per end. And a weird thing was happening where the peg was splitting at some point. So on the exit side, 2 prongs would come out, and it didn't come out as a single peg. So it came out like a little 2-prong fork. And that was maddening. And I was more frustrated, and not that I'm Chris Becksford, but it felt good that I was more annoyed by the mistake being made. Like, yeah, I can fix it, or it, like I can handle this. And it feels good when I'm more annoyed that I made the mistake to begin with. Like, oh, I can patch that, but stupid me for doing that in the first place.
Yeah.
And I like being able to pick on myself that way rather than like, oh, the table's ruined, Like,
yeah. Yeah, you're going to get through it. That's the difference.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing that I've noticed watching people work over the years is, I'll go there and they know what they're going to be shooting, and they'll have prep stuff, and they may have even prepped the stuff for me a couple of weeks ago, but there's always a moment or a couple times during a shoot where somebody will say, oh, how did I do that?
I love that.
Even though they're whoever they are and they can do everything really well, when you're woodworking and you're doing it for a living and you're doing one project after another, that last project, that quickly goes to the back of your mind, and you're on what you're doing right now. So it takes less time to rethink what you did and figure it out. But even if it's like, oh, right, let me take the 30 seconds and figure out how to do this, that plays into the past experience and into how quickly or how efficiently you work as well, because you have more to grab from in your arsenal. But
have either of you had an author go, how did I do that? What did I write?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Let me open the manuscript. But it's pretty fun because they have 100 different ways to do it in their heads. It's like, what did I write? Let me make sure we keep this consistent, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Cracks me up.
Yeah, I mean, for me, normally we're doing the piece in real time, kind of.
Dude.
So,
right,
the camera stops rolling, they go, how am I going to do that? Oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. Which one do you want? Which is really nice. We're not beholden to anything other than what we're recording in the moment. But even like a guy like Mike, who his methods are thoroughly thought through, there is a reason why he is doing everything he is doing. But there are times when he goes, oh, I forgot that I leave the blue tape on because I use this little thing and this little shim to hold the router above it, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, so he's still working through his method. There's never, and he gets crap because, oh, well, in that other article you did it this way. Why are you, and it's like, we could re-record. I just released the last video from the hanging wall cabinet. We could re-record it right now, and it would be totally different because he's reworked methods so many times.
So how we talk about web strategy and refreshing the website? What if we just re-recorded a bunch of stuff and slightly updated it with the new method? No, now he uses green tape. New web series.
When you were talking about not knowing what did I do last time and everything, I was really frustrated with myself about not taking notes on certain aspects of ukuleles, and I didn't know how thin I went with the strips for the lining. And so I just went down to 80 thousandths or whatever. I was like, that's what I'm going to do. When I went to put them in the steam box, I opened up the steam box and there was the extra lining piece sitting in the steam box from the uke prior. Because I put an extra one in case I broke one. And it was like, oh, look, there it is. I pull it out and I was able to measure it. I was like, oh, okay, it was about 80 thousandths. I'm on track.
Well done.
Yeah, that was like, if past you is helping me.
Anissa, you get an apron yet?
No, but I saw Mike's post yesterday or the day before, so I'm kind of hankering for an apron again. I talked myself out of the apron, and I was just going to continue with the tool belt that I have, but I'm thinking about the apron again. No, so the answer is no apron.
No, they're great.
I have an apron and I love it. And a part of me, though, I have a lab coat that I kind of want to start wearing.
Get into this, yeah.
A what? A lab coat? Is that what you said?
How is this news to you? It's what he mixed in, right? Or recorded in? Or
I used to. Okay, so like old school recording engineers, like back in the Beatles days, they all wore lab coats. The Beatles in England, it would be a brown lab coat, I think, because they're more rigid with their systems. And I thought that was always really cool. And I always wanted to be like the mad scientist, right? So I bought a lab coat, and it had my nickname embroidered in it and everything, and everyone knew. Like as soon as like things started to get little, Ben's getting weird sonically or something like that, I would pull the lab coat out and I put the lab coat on. Everybody, oh man, it's getting real. So I have a lab coat now that's just sitting there, not doing anything. And I think it was a picture of Steve Latta he had like a chore coat or whatever, but it was very purpose-built, like woodworking coat with the pockets on the sleeve for pencils and everything. I looked at that, I was like, oh man, that's hyper useful. That might be the future right there. So I keep thinking about pulling out my lab coat. Because, you get glue on it. Who cares? You can put pockets all over it. And it's easier to put on than an apron.
The other day, I was on Poshmark, which is like a used clothes website, like an eBay for clothes.
Okay.
Although you just buy it. Anyway, because I love my apron because it covers the full front of me. But I so regularly get glue.
Are you looking for a back apron?
No, I want like an armpit and arm apron because I'm tired of like rubbing glue out of my arm hair. So I think just like a full, but I can't find anything that fits the criteria of
it's a shirt. It's a shirt, Barry. It's called a shirt. You wear a shirt and it covers your armpits.
No, because it needs to go down past my legs, like past my knees.
Pants, shirts,
but it has to be able to take on and off so I'm not steaming up. I think I need like a full evening winter wrap ball gown. It's the only thing that's going to give me the coverage I want. And hopefully be easy on, easy off.
You remember when you and I threatened to take sewing lessons?
Oh, we should.
I know. The only thing that stopped that was my wife being like, I can show you how to use a sewing machine. I was like, that'd be less fun. And she was like, let's pretend this didn't happen.
I know. I hope her voice was just dripping with disdain and disappointment.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
That should be online content with threads.
Oh.
Sew your own apron / ball gown. Shop gown. I'm serious though. I need coverage.
So
I need coverage.
You know that this like improv podcast experiment has gone too far when we are coming up with online threads content.
I don't know why else you have me on.
All right, well, that obviously does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you enjoyed it, let us know if you did, and maybe we'll do one of these some other time. And with fair warning, of course. Please send in your questions. We're answering more and more questions these days, so please send in your questions to shoptalk@taunton.com. Stay safe, everyone. Have fun in the shop. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.